point here. Are the characters and the events in the Ruby Tear Catcher, are they real?
Most of the characters in the Ruby Tear Catcher are real in the sense that the events and the people that I write about are real. The timelines are correct, and you know, Layla, who's the main character, she is a composite character. However, this is a very personal story to me because I know of the people that these events happen to.
So she projects some of your feelings, does she not?
Well, it's interesting because, as I said, the story began with my life. So there is a lot of me in there. And I would say that Layla really personifies everyone's heroine. Everybody wants to be like her because she is a very strong character. She believes in herself and believes in the love of her family. And those are the things that carry her through life. She has, you know, she has convictions and believes in what she says, doesn't cower to anyone, and really it idealizes. It's who I think every woman wants to be. So yes, there's a lot of my own character in her. I'd like to think she is me.
Mm-hmm. I know that there's a lot of strong women in Iran. Are they getting their voice? Are they able to be heard? And if so, how?
Well, of course, for me right now, because I don't live there, I can't say firsthand that I have any knowledge of how things have evolved. Mm-hmm. But based on news and also communication with people who still live in Iran, it certainly does seem that women's rights are evolving. 2 years ago, the revolution that took place, it was almost 2 years ago, it was called the Green Revolution, where all the Iranians, the color green became symbolic of their quest for freedom. They also dubbed that a women's revolution. A lot of the women were out there next to the men and asking and looking for their rights. So I think that women's rights in Iran have definitely evolved since the earlier days of the Islamic Revolution, but I think and I hope that they will continue to evolve in the right direction.
Yeah. How would Layla fit in today into those two worlds, Iran and the United States?
You know, there's a lot of conflict with that. It's interesting that you ask that question because Layla grew up, as I did, in a country where even though I lived in a microcosmic Western world, I was surrounded by a culture and religion. This is Persia, after all. At the same time, you know, Layla, in the story, she travels to the U.S. for her college education, and suddenly there are some drastic differences for her that she experienced, similar to what I experienced. Something as simple as wearing shorts. This is just not something we do in Iran. And when I first came to college in the U.S., and I do describe this story, of course, in the book, is when I first put on a pair of shorts under pressure from my friends because we were going on a lake on a boat, I was so self-conscious and so uncomfortable, I really thought everybody was staring at me. But I actually looked like everybody else, it's just I wasn't used to that. Mm-hmm. Things such as, I can tell you that my first experience of going to McDonald's drive-through was out of this world. Whoever heard of that? You know, the fact that I had my first American burger and fries was cool enough, let alone to go through a drive-through. So, you know, Layla, like I have, really adjusted and adapted to her two different worlds. She really had two different worlds to deal with, to cope with inside of Iran. And then as she departed, you know, obviously the influence of Iran was gone and it was more of the Western one. However, back to an Islamic revolution where laws were changed and stricter and She couldn't be the way she used to be in the old Iran. So she kept adapting to her changing world. That's one of the reasons why I said it's good to have her as our hero, because that's what we really have to do to survive.
You know, there's a lot of authors like yourself that start out with books like this that are so poignant and tell such a very important story in the history of mankind and womankind and so on. And a good Hollywood producer watches those and says, that could be a movie. Do you have any aspirations that way? Do you feel that it could happen?
I'm a very hopeful person.
Okay.
So I would say absolutely yes. I would love to see this in a movie. I've had a lot of people tell me it would make a great movie.
Okay.
I do think it's very inspirational as well as educational. It is a love story, and it's a story of passion and love between a woman and her father and her brother, and an impossible love between her and an American Christian. But there's hope. It's a really gives us all hope that no matter what, we can survive it.
Okay. Now, I have to ask you the significance of the Discourse on Fundamentalism article that was presented in the story. What is the story there?
As I mentioned, Layla falls in love with an American Christian. His name is Jack. Without giving away the plot, at some point, Layla picks up a newspaper and reads this article. It was called Discourse on Fundamentalism. And the article reminded her very much of the conversations that she used to have with Jack about their religions and the parallels and some of the differences, of course. This particular article, as published in this novel, is significant in the sense that it really, in a poignant way, points out how religious fundamentalism is destructive. It really stands for the fact that religion, for the sake of religion, it's great. You know, it brings us together, it gives us hope, it bonds us, but when taken to extreme, it's destructive to people's lives. And it really helps us to understand that, you know, it's this sort of action. It's religious fundamentalism and that way of extreme thinking that creates an us versus them mentality. And those are not the principles on which Islam and Christianity were built upon.
Okay, very good. You know, we won't ask you to give away the whole book or the plot, not at all. We want people to read it. My wife is reading it as we speak. And, but does it have a happy ending?
Well, I can't give away the ending, but it's a love story and it's hopeful.
It's hopeful. Well, that's pretty good in itself. Do you believe you took any kind of risk in writing this story?
Yes, I do believe I took some risk, although by writing this book, I had no intention to make any kind of a political statement. I do certainly describe life under the Islamic Republic. I felt I have a story to tell. I felt it was important to tell it, but there is risk. And so at this point, by having published this novel, I cannot return home.
Oh, my. That is a shame. And I know everyone wants to return to their homes, regardless of the form of government or whatever. So I'm very sorry about that. Is there a possibility of sequel with this book?
Well, actually, I've already started writing a sequel. I've had a lot of my early readers express interest in, they want to know what happens to Layla, what happens to Jack, what happens to her family and the country. Frankly, I think a sequel is needed for another reason. As I mentioned, I really have a message to tell with this book. And I hope to bring hope and tolerance and understanding to people. So as a part of that mission, I'd like to definitely publish a sequel. At the same time, I think as the rights of women in the Middle East are evolving through the revolutions that are going on everywhere these days in all the Middle Eastern countries,
Yes.
there's a lot more to tell.
Yes, I'm imagine so. Any certain authors or books that kind of give you an inkling of how to do your thing? Did it influence you in any way?
Yeah, I would say there were two or three books that really influenced me. Believe it or not, The Great Gatsby. One of the things that really influenced me, I love the way F. Scott Fitzgerald says so much with so few words. I really...
Minimalist.
Yes, yes. I mean, he tells a whole big story in just a few pages. So I really took that on as a learning for me. But also a message in his book is exactly that. I can't remember, I can't quote it because I don't remember it exactly, but in the first chapter, he makes reference to the fact that, you know, if you think you're great, well, it's because you're privileged. So don't look down on other people who haven't had the same privileges as you. It's that same message of tolerance. So that really inspired me. I also was influenced and inspired by the very popular book, The Kite Runner, as well as Lolita in Tehran. Lolita in Tehran specifically is about a group of women who are reading books that are banned by the Islamic government, and in their own world, they're rebelling against those rules. So all of that really inspired me.
Now, I know one place where your book is sold, and that's Anderson's. As a matter of fact, you'll be speaking at a little book signing at Anderson's. Becky has all famous authors on, so you're right in there. And I know you're looking forward to that signing up opportunity there. So Anderson's for sure is one place. Do you know where else Ruby Tearcatcher might be found?
Sure. The Ruby Tearcatcher is available on online booksellers like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I also have additional book signings at Barnes & Noble, but I'm also going on a road trip. So next week I'm doing a road show in LA, followed with, I'm actually going to Paris for a book signing, and then San Francisco, New York, DC,
Wow.
the whole works. But really, if you go to any bookstore, even if they don't carry it on hand, they'll be happy to order it for you.
Right. Well, I can say this much. My wife is entranced with the book, and she said one thing. She said, ask her if it's going to be a movie, because it should be. So I'll wish you luck there.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Naheed, and I hope that our audience is enthralled by your story. It's a personal story. Comes out through Layla in the book, The Ruby Tearcatcher. And I had not known what a ruby tearcatcher was before. Are there other colored tearcatchers as well, or are they all ruby?
Actually, to find one in ruby is nearly impossible. Most of them come in a blue color.
Okay, very good. Well, a tearcatcher anyway. But much luck to you. Thank you for being on the show and enlightening our audience a little bit more about Iran.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for having me, Kevin.
Thank you. That's another show, and we'll see you next month. Kevin Dolan signing off for Eyez on Naperville.